Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Gail of Gaia, and this is Free Range, where we graze on wild ideas and we want to graze freely as well. So, I have a wonderful guest today who has done a great deal of work in deep research, and you all information about him is listed in the description, and I hope you'll take a look at it because he has done phenomenal independent work. And that's what I appreciate the most. So let me bring Frank Jacob on.
Hi,
Hi,
Gail.
Frank. So happy to have you here. It's so exciting, all the things going on in the planet. We're living in a very unprecedented time, no doubt. But we're also being subjected to some things that are very problematic that many people aren't aware of. But one of the things that I wanted to start out with is you had given a presentation on the magnetosphere, which was rather interesting where it had gone to. And I was wondering if there had been any further progress since we talked last.
Well, I've been checking back on a occasional basis, and the the channel is basically still there, and it's still clearly talking about the time has not. I mean, the pace has not accelerated. The pace is still the same, which was already accelerated in a sense, which is this 5 to 6 miles per month of a shift before it reaches that 40-degree mark. But
Mhm.
other than that, there's been nothing new about it. No.
Oh, okay. Well, sometimes they don't tell, sometimes they leave things too. I don't know who's doing the monitoring or what have you, but sometimes they don't always tell us what's going on. Sort of like the Schumann resonance when all of a sudden it's not there anymore. Or
Well, it
there's
was
no,
there, but it wasn't at those particular stations were not there. They were shut down or shut off or whatever. We had access to other stations, and
uh-huh.
they were very prevalent. They were there constantly. There was no The human residences haven't just gone away. That can't happen. I mean, that's just
Well, I didn't
physically.
mean it that way. I just meant that it wasn't
But yeah, they
available
were
for us to
gone and all
see.
these
Yeah,
exactly. I remember that, and a lot of people were freaking out about it. But the
yeah.
Schumann frequencies are actually fairly. They've been fairly quiet and stable at 8 hertz. So interestingly,
Yeah, I
that's
wonder what's that all about, you know? Um, wow. Well,
well, it might be something. I mean, we don't know, for sure what the cause of that is, but we have to also take into account that the work that a lot of people in the world are doing to clear up, things in the world and to bring out information and to inform people about consciousness and to inform people about how they can affect the world and affect the timeline with their consciousness. I mean, we've definitely reached a lot of people. So, this has to be having an effect as well. I can't imagine it wouldn't be having an effect. And I think the fact that we're having such an effect is reflected in the, craziness that I feel a lot of people are experiencing right now with censorship and with just the chaotic stuff going on in the world right now seems to be escalating in a lot of ways. So yeah,
it's,
maybe that's a sign that that there's that saying, right? If we weren't effective, their propaganda wouldn't be necessary.
this is true. That's a nice way of looking at it as well. And so I heard you mention in one of the videos that truth is the new spirituality. Would you care to elaborate on that at all?
Well, that was an interesting. Um, well, what led up to that is very interesting because John Nolan and John invited me back on
Yeah,
the Inspired channel,
yeah.
and I had been doing some research on based on an article that somebody sent me a link, and I ended up on this interesting investigative journalist's page, and it was an article about kind of like fake consciousness, right? The author's
Yeah, that
name
was
is
freaky.
John
I read that. Oh
Fleischer.
my God, don't tell me they faked that too, but hey, it just goes to figure,
Well,
doesn't it?
he's an independent journalist on the Unlimited Hangout website, and he posted an interesting article about this synthetic new age, and it was sort of focusing around Barbara Marx Hubbard and her connection to heart math and Esalen and this whole movement of using soft technology to synchronize especially in the case of Heart Math, who I'm very familiar with because we've actually
Yeah.
filmed them and done films about them.
Oh,
And
you did. Okay.
so,
Yeah.
I know about the M wave, and I have an M wave over there somewhere. I never use it because I just all I need to do to synchronize my heart and my brain is to pick up my hang drum now and play, and that synchronizes it. So
Oh, that's
that's been
beautiful. Yeah,
easy.
musicians seem to be a step ahead that way in so many ways because they're much more right-brained.
Well, you can use music absolutely to synchronize your heart and your brain. You just have to have a developed musical. You have to have a bit of a musical. What's the word? You just kind of have to have a little bit of knowledge about music and have a taste for good music and music that and everyone has, of course, different tastes, and everyone is coming from a different place. But it's like everyone should find their music that they can resonate with and that they can fly with or meditate with or travel with. Everyone can have different kinds of music as well. I have mine, I know, and when I play it, it's another level altogether because you put your body you bring in the left brain as well, because you have to actually coordinate your body. In the case of being a percussionist, like I'm doing right now, a lot of percussion work, so I have to coordinate my brain, my body, and my heart and my feelings. It's an interesting experience, really. But
Wow.
that's not the point. The point was, I saw this article and I was shocked because, I know people that know Barbara Marx Hubbard, and she's kind of like the sort of the godmother of the New Age movement in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. But to see this person go to the extent, and I read, it was like it's a 30-minute read or 40-minute read, and I took 6 hours because I wanted to make sure that what this guy was writing about wasn't just some off the cuff vendetta or whatever. And I meticulously followed his sources, and they locked up with my own. And so I knew that he had really put together in a concise way a lot of the things that in the back of my mind had been kind of brewing for not just recently, but actually for years. I mean, and tying in people like Joe Dispenza and Dr. Bruce Lipton
Yes.
and Greg Braden, and people like that are highly, highly respected out there. And
Yes. Yes.
seeing that they are actually out, connected intimately with HeartMath, pitching their, technology, or, connecting themselves, aligning themselves with that organization. And that organization was heavily aligned with Barbara Marx Hubbard. And then through Hubbard and her foundations, it was tied into, like, she had this thing called the Foundation for Conscious Evolution, which a lot of people know in the New Age movement. And this foundation is seed funded, and was brought to life by Lawrence Rockefeller and this Rockefeller Foundation.
Now
And
that's
I'm
scary.
sorry, but and it's black and white because Barbara writes about it in her own words. It's not like he just sort of off the cuff invented this. So he quotes in her book, and it's really quite an adventure to go through and read quotes out of all the different books and everything, and connect the dots, and you realize, you know, there is something that's kind of always bothered me about the New Age movement, and that it was, it's this whole thing about, yeah, we're going to be enlightened, we're going to get into the fifth dimension, and or whatever that means. Nobody can explain what that means. That's another nice thing about it. It's totally open to interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's very, very feel good, and it's very, very well. Like when you bring up dark things, it's like, oh, don't go there because that's the dark thing. You'll create it. You'll
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
manifest
That's true. And it's like,
it, right?
well, how do you
And
know about it if you
I
don't
mean,
go there?
I've been at the dark stuff from. I started with both. I mean, I got into very early in my life. I started when I was around 12 years old, reading books about consciousness. And when I was 14,
Wow.
15, hanging out with people that were 3, 4, 5 years older than me, that were exploring, the Carlos Castaneda and the Jane Roberts material. And this stuff is like very, um, cutting edge. There wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
lot of channeling stuff. That was all coming out of the 70s and 60s. And so this whole new age thing with channeling came much later. But it came on the heels of Barbara Marx Hubbard and her books. And Barbara Marx Hubbard is connected to the United Nations, and you can, you can just do a search on Google, and you'll find her speaking in front of the United Nations, and they praise her like she's no tomorrow, right? This is like the absolute, authority on consciousness. And I'm asking myself, well, the United Nations, I mean, who are, like, what are they all about, right? Who are they connected with, right? If the United Nations are all connected to, what did we just go through in the last 2 years? The United Nations, the world, all the letter alphabet soup of organizations are all connected through the United Nations, World Health Organization, Gavi, and you get the same players. Rockefellers. I mean, the Rockefellers were the really literally brought the pharmaceutical industry into the world. They shepherded the pharmaceutical industry into the medical world, and the medical practice
they chased out all of all the
they began
naturopathic.
funding the universities, and once they began funding universities and sitting on the board of directors of these universities, of course, they can then major influence the protocol and the curriculum being taught at those universities. That's one of the first things you get into when you start exploring conspiracy. You start analyzing conspiracies. You realize that Rockefellers are right in the thick of it from the very, very beginning. And so why would anybody who's a very progressive New Age author be aligned with them? I mean, well, you realize, Barbara Marx Hubbard was the daughter of Marx, Marx Toys, and Marx Toys was the largest toy company in the world for a while. So they were a very powerful, wealthy family, and those people tend to move in small circles. So, right from the get-go, she never missed a meal. So when you're growing spiritually as a person, and I mean, it doesn't matter who you go to, but a lot of people that have survived and risen to become spiritual teachers, not everyone, but many, they've had their deep, dark night of the soul, and they've been on this park bench and without food and starving and had near-death experiences, or whatever it is, right? So
homeless or
it's
whatever.
very interesting when you begin to think
when
about
you're
all
down
this.
and out.
Where I'm going with it all is that I've always kind of noticed that in the New Age movement, because I looked at a lot of the dark stuff and the conspiracy stuff and it didn't pull me down. I got to say, this stuff about, it'll pull you down in the darkness. No, man, it doesn't. It just wakens you up. It makes you skeptical about the narrative that's being pushed at you from the global scene, the mainstream media. And, you just have to make sure you have to be able to balance it with spiritual teachings and spiritual writings. And, that helps, because then you can kind of work with the two of them, and you can't just do one and you can't just do the other. And so a lot of the New Age movement ignores that side of it, and that side of it has become very important right now, because ever since this year kind of exploded in my personal case with the Looking Glass Guardians and the timelines, right? We've been talking about timelines, and timelines are something which people can identify with. And what is a timeline? And, how do we manifest timelines? And don't we all have our own time? There's all these questions that come up. But the fact is, we are all on a consensus timeline, and that consensus timeline is the one that we're resonating with because of our belief system, because of what we accept as true. And that creates a certain resonance and a frequency. And if that truth is based on lies or fabrications or manipulation, then we're enforcing a negative timeline. So that's the big theme for me this year, and this is no different. So coming across this article and looking at it, I decided, hey, John, we should do a talk about this on Inspired. This whole fake new, this synthetic.
Yeah, he puts out some great stuff, and I love the talks that you guys have.
He answered on my, I wrote him, I spoke on his box, whatever, and he answered like he just freaked out because he's been thinking about exactly the same stuff.
Synchronicity.
Right, synchronicity. So we did this show about it, and people misinterpret it, of course, always. Somehow you tell people that it's strange that, Greg Braden and Dispenza and stuff are connected with heart math, and they're connected to the Rockefellers, and that means that the elites and the cabal has a leash on the New Age movement. It doesn't mean that we're discounting the work that these guys have done. It just, the question is, in 2022, and it's a valid question, there's a difference between the kind of spirituality being described by the noosphere version of Barbara Marx Hubbard, leading to technology, leading to transhumanism, and the kind of spirituality leading to the absolute unfoldment of the hidden locked potential of human beings, which has yet to unfold. And we're at that critical crossroads right now. And since those individuals and characters tend to be on the side of the fence populated by those heading toward the mechanistic transhumanist side, it's absolutely valid question for those of
I
us who have
agree.
read their books or study or watched their seminars or whatever to ask, hey guys, did you know this? And how do you
Mhm.
feel about it? And are you, I mean, shouldn't you actually distance yourself from that? Or what's your plan? Is there a plan?
I agree. You know what? I was really proud of you too that you called them out. I really did. I really was because I knew about who was behind it all. And the same thing happened with Gaia.com for a while when they found out about the leadership there. That was very satanic to say the least. But anyway, we have a right to know, where do you really stand? Because of the things that you're affiliated with are certainly not in the best interest of organic humanity.
Right. And I mean, they do mention, I mean, and it's true. And the funny thing is, I get people slamming me saying, well, before you open your mouth, I was at a conference and well, I actually can open my mouth because I've spent hours and hours editing and producing the videos of those conferences that they do. So I don't only hear it once, I probably hear it 10 times before I'm done.
Oh, so you really get,
So
yeah.
I'm in deep with that material. I know that material like better than even even they do sometimes. Like the people I speak it, they say it and it's done, right? But me, I'm sitting there later watching it again and again and cutting in the slides and listening to it again, making sure that the transitions are smooth. Does it make sense? Are we going to leave it this long, or what can we take out? So I got to listen very carefully. So I have to understand what they're talking about. And so for me, it's not like I don't know them. I do know them. I do know what they're about, and I don't want to insult them by making them sound like they're part of the evil cabal. No, it's not at all. I do believe that they're genuine, but maybe
Yes.
they're a little older, than me and my generation, and they're not as critical, or they fell into that groove when those people were, at their
I
peak, and they
Yeah.
didn't question it because they didn't really see the threat. And now that transhumanism has reached the point where within 10 to 20 years, it's going to be over because the time to decide which direction we're heading has to be made now. So maybe now they actually themselves need to reconsider where they're coming from. And not in a sense that, people are trying to question with their teachings. It's in the sense that, NLP, like neuro-linguistic programming. What are you producing? What are you putting out there? Where are you leading people? Are you willing to backtrack on what you said and say, you know what, I've learned some new information. What I said last time is a new context. It means,
Exactly. I
right?
say
And the
that in my
just so that we're clear, what we talked about there, and what we knew from this frame of mind and foundation of information that we had back then, what is still relevant and what needs to be adjusted, because that's okay. That's what real science is about. I mean, in a way, if you're a conspiracy analyst, you're a scientist of conspiracies. You're an analyst of conspiracies. Conspiracies are a real thing. People get together and they organize and make plans, and a group like the WEF is a conspiracy. It's a bunch of people. They have courses. They teach leaders that they position in place within
like
governments and
Trudeau.
all the major governments of the world. So that is a form of conspiracy, because those people not only go to the parliament or the Congress or wherever to represent their people, but in the back of their mind, they're representing and trying to slide in the agendas that they learned at the crash course 3-day weekend seminar in Barbados on a luxury cruiser with Klaus Schwab. So I mean, all these things that are happening right now, people have never really experienced this before, and things are escalating and the pace is escalating, and the integrity is a big question now, and that's why truth is the new spirituality.
Thank you. Yes. What a concept, eh?
Crazy, right?
Really. This was kind of interesting. I thought you might want to comment about this. Harry always comes up with some interesting statements. Remember the symphonic rock transforming into punk and heavy metal, leaving the hippies bewildered. That's really true. The heavy metal, I can't even listen to heavy metal, if you want to know the truth. I can't.
Actually, you know what? I do actually. I listen to Black Sabbath once in a while, because when I grew up, that was one of the
I know,
first
but
bands that I listened to. But they were like the founders and the inventors of it. And
I
if you
didn't really
listen to
think of
their,
them as black. I didn't think of them that way as being heavy metal.
no, I
though.
mean they the name really bit them in the butt, because they're not dark, worshipers of anything. And if you listen to, the lyrics of Geezer Butler, it's all about, children of the world, and being like, it's all very spiritual. It's actually very Christian. You know, and it's very critical of the system, like War Pigs and Children of the Grave and all these. So I mean, and it's like, for me, it was like they invented something that was genuine. Everything else that came after heavy metal, for me, was a copy of Black Sabbath. So I could never, and it, you know, got into the whole. I mean, it metamorphed into all kinds of versions of heavy metal, but the pure form of metal still goes back to Black Sabbath. And you
Oh,
could
good job. I
argue a
didn't
little
know that.
bit, you know, Led Zeppelin, but Led Zeppelin's much more diverse and goes more into folky stuff as well and symphonic stuff. But, you know, I mean, for me, the criteria is not that it's heavy metal or has guitars that are distorted. The criteria is it honest? Is it honest music to itself? Is it saying something? Is the message good? Is the message positive? And can you get something from it that energizes you in a good way? So that, in that sense, it's dangerous to classify any kind of music. Even punk rock could give somebody energy, because punk in a way was a rebellion against this sort of like overly synthetic and, you know, stylized music out there that began emerging, where everything was overproduced and you had to be a certain level, and a certain kind of producer had to produce your record or you wouldn't get into the charts. So punk had this sort of rebellious thing to it that was genuine as well. Unfortunately, a lot of the, you know, punk bands were serious drug addicts and couldn't keep it together and didn't leave a very positive impression for the world in terms of what, you know, what are you presenting out there to your audience. And I think it's important that your kids that you're playing to, that you don't, you know, try to mislead them into something dark, right? And so, but yeah, I don't know how we got off on that topic. Yeah, you brought up this symphonic stuff leading to
Yeah, I
punk.
did. That's okay.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to bounce around some anyway. I hope you don't mind, just based on the conversation. But I saw that later, and I wanted to bring it up. And then I saw some other work that you had done or brought up, and I was going, "Oh my God, I can't believe somebody else is saying this finally." Oh my, and that was about food.
Yeah.
And your the photonic light of food, and you were talking about Bovie.
Yeah, Antoine Beauvais. Yeah, he
Could
invented
you
the
explain
scale
that?
called the Bovie scale.
What is the Bovie
Well,
scale? Could you explain
well,
that, please?
the Bovie scale is the you could say it's like the photoelectric signature of food. It's the biophotons that, you know, are showing you the energy of the energy of the food. Any living organism has kind of a morphogenetic field expressed through the biophoton activity.
Yes.
And food, the reason that humans get energized and get something from food is because of that biophoton signature. And food that is high vibration, high resonance, has a high Bovie scale. In other words,
Okay.
Bovie worked out that the neutral level of Bovies is 6,500 Bovies. And then you can go lower than that, down to 0, of course. But when you're down in the 0 to 2,000 range, it creates immune dysfunction. It stunts your growth. It generates infections in your body. It attracts and accumulates bacterial zones in your body. And yeah, and when you're up in the 2 to 6,000 range, you know, it's food that's detrimental to you. It's not giving you energy. In fact, John Nolan said it nicely. It's death. It creates death. It's like
Yeah.
instead of going 6,500
Well,
and up, you're going 60. You're letting yourself get sucked down into death by depleting your system with food that's very low in Bovie count.
well, I noticed something else that you said, and one of the things that I really appreciate about, because I don't know if you're aware of it, but my entire background from a professional standpoint, prior to doing what I'm doing now, which I kind of have been self-taught, which may be obvious, but anyway, is a nutritionist. I worked as a nutritionist,
Really?
and I was trained traditionally, and then I had 3 years in naturopathic medical school. So I really kind of know both sides. And I was really happy to see some of the things that you were saying about food and photonic light. I've been looking for a way to measure Hertz levels of food. And I know that in Russia, they had something like that. I haven't been able to locate it. I wanted it years ago when I was working as a nutritionist, but I couldn't find it because its impact for people to see
Yeah.
why it will, this, you should be eating this, and this is why you don't really want to eat any more of this than you absolutely think you have to, you know.
Right.
And so I got that background, and I was
Well,
really
the
happy
reason
to
I
see.
brought it up is because there's little discussion about bovies in the world. And the fact is, it
Yeah.
is through, we're always talking about the new age and the, evolving spiritually and connecting and, and to the field and all this stuff, right? Well, the best way to connect to the field is to raise your frequency. But if you're eating foods and subjecting yourself to materials that are very low bovie count, then you are pulling yourself away from there and into hell, into death. Basically, you're giving yourself. I mean, things like I can play a chart up on the screen if you
Yeah,
want.
go ahead, go ahead.
Check
Please
this out.
do.
I mean,
That's
it's like
fascinating. I love
right.
that when I read
A
that,
lot of people don't
because
think about this, right? But look at
exactly.
stuff like a
Well,
thousand is
let me enlarge this here. Let me get off.
you see basically that foods that are down in the 0 to 1,000 range are that are like they're contaminated, they're rotten, moldy. Asbestos. People that move into homes that there's black mold, they say it's one of the most dangerous things, right? That's why, because it's really, really toxic and it really is impairing to your body. And then, not much further away from that are foods you can buy in the major grocery stores. They're always sweetened, they're full of saturated fats, they've got a lot of chemicals in them. They remember when COVID started, they told us we had to always bathe our hands in this disinfectant stuff, this chemical stuff to, make sure that we didn't have any germs or get any viruses. That stuff is like, that's toxic. That goes directly into your system through your skin, because your skin is the largest organ, right? So it'll absorb right into your body. So people that are always dosing their hands with this chemical stuff, thinking they're going to save themselves from a virus, are actually killing their bodies, literally. And then a level up from there: aluminum, lead, body care products, with synthetic things in them, and then things like fatty cheeses, fried foods, mercury, Coke. Yeah, how many people drink Coke all the time? Or not just Coke, but Sprite or whatever, Fanta. I mean, all these fake, drinks that are full of nothing but chemicals, right? And then, milk isn't good homogenized. Like, if you're going to drink milk, you should drink fresh milk. Tap water is mostly toxic. I mean, and I'm lucky in my area it isn't, but there are areas in the cities where there's hundreds of chemicals in the tap water, right?
It's
So, basically, you're looking at a few of these things here. When you're looking up into the on the other end of the scale, you get into, obviously, the vegetables and things are great, but that's like, even that, it's like it's just stabilized, right? It's like, if you're at 6 to 7,000 bovies, you're eating food which is, yeah, it's sustaining you, but it isn't charging you. And one of the things that I had the experience and the fortune to experience in my life was working with Ann Wigmore, who had brought into the world wheatgrass and juice and sprouting and all these different things that
oh
gave
wow, how
you
cool.
energy, right? So, I mean, I was
Yeah.
getting charged off of the food that I was eating. You could literally see an aura on the food. And then you move up higher and you get into interesting things like crystals, right? Formations like Himalayan salt or spirulina algae. Those are all like single-celled organisms that, in a way, it's a form of crystal, right? And then you have spring water, and you have, then it's interesting, religious buildings with sacred geometry, and the Cheops pyramid, the king's chamber, all these things. People that have an altar of crystals, they'll tell you that they feel the energy coming off. Well, there's a reason for that. That's because it has a high bovie count. So bovies is a hidden, unknown topic in society. We always talk about vitamins. People go out and they take a lot of vitamins and vitamin supplements, but those can be very dangerous too, because they're a
Right.
concentrated form of a vitamin, and our bodies are not really designed to eat high concentrations of vitamins. They don't occur in nature. Our bodies are designed to take what's in nature and break it down and transmutate it into our system, right?
Yes, and therein lies the problem, because when they brought in the GMO food and all the chemicals and everything, you can just see the decline in American health as a result of it. We have
Yeah.
obesity that's off the charts. We have type 2 diabetes off the chart. And all this is directly, I mean, you can see the correlation when they added the GMOs to the Dr. Stephanie Seneff. I've had her on. The glyphosate connection, the GMO connection. I mean, anything that's a GMO is saturated in the glyphosate.
Right.
It's toxic poison.
The reason that they developed GMO soy and other forms of certain hybrid crops is
Corn.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, they would dose them with so much glyphosate that normal plants would die. But these particular hybrid plants can survive because they're genetically manipulated and engineered to resist glyphosate, high doses glyphosate. But that doesn't mean that the glyphosate just doesn't, leave the plant then.
Exactly.
It's actually part of the plant. So people eating GMOs, a lot of people that have a wheat allergy. We used to talk about this in the 90s. When I was working with Ann Wigmore, it was at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s.
It's from the glyphosate.
And we used to, I remember, going on, going to the newspaper in my local town, making a big deal about using Roundup on all these lawn services were driving through the neighborhood with their white trucks, and they were dosing all the front lawns with glyphosate, right? And so, we made a stink about it. I mean, my parents were uncomfortable about it because, because I mean, most people don't want you to go out there and make a big noise about something that everyone is doing. Yeah, but just because everyone is doing it doesn't make it right. Exactly. So we would go to the paper and we would talk about it. We would have articles written about it. This was back in the early 90s, but nobody was listening. They thought you were just a screwball, right? And then now what happened is that, Monsanto got sued by this gardener for $9 billion or $1 trillion. I don't know what, $9 billion, I think, whatever, or $30 billion or something. I don't remember now. I shouldn't be quoting this. I don't know, but there was a huge lawsuit. And I remember Bayer had just purchased.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember that too.
Purchased the company, and then bam, they got hit with a major lawsuit. Of course, I never heard about it. It's funny because things like this should be
coordinated.
News stories like this shouldn't just die away. The fact is, when we were talking about it, they would come out once. If you got lucky, they would write an article, and then it would go away. But when a major suit like this happens with respect to Roundup and glyphosate, which is a derivative of Agent Orange, this stuff all came out of the Vietnam War. All these things they were turned into the agriculture. This is how Rockefellers niftily take a chemical used for war in one part of the world, and then when the war is over, it's like, how can we make more money with that? Hey, we'll use it as pesticide and we'll market it as Roundup. Yeah, it sounds like a good name. They have think tank meetings and they'll come up with a name like Roundup. Round up all the bad weeds, right? Actually, it's the weeds, the dandelions, that are the most potent, nutritious form of natural food, one of them that you can eat, growing in your own yard. What do? We dose them with chemicals to kill them, right? This is how upside down society has turned, right? So taking a lot of vitamin supplements ain't going to save you because your body's not used to that kind of stuff. That's not how your body digests food.
There's a big difference in the quality of supplements too.
That too, on top of that.
Yeah. That's a whole nother subject. And it is a major problem because, some of those maybe I shouldn't say a name, but some of those things, they should go in one end and out the other too. That's a whole nother aspect of some supplements. And you're not going to get really quality supplements from a place like Walmart. I'm sorry. Okay, that's enough on that subject because that's a very potent subject too. Because that is what
you hit the point. You said that Americans are so overweight, and what Ann Wigmore used to say is the reason they're overweight is because they're starving.
Exactly. That's what I had heard. I heard you said that too. I've said that myself in the past. The obesity is caused from two things. Number one, those people are so toxic that they're storing the toxins in the fat cells.
Yes.
And the fat is not able to move out much because, for one thing, they're not getting the nutrients that they need, which is why they have what seems to be a continuous appetite without feeling satisfied even after they eat. So all they're getting really is calories.
Right, exactly,
which leads to the problem, which turns it into a
well, and the thing that we need to add is what they're also getting is they're getting low vibrational information passed into their body, which is pulling their vibration down. And so when we talk about raising our consciousness and getting to the fifth dimension, you have to take into consideration nutrition. You can't just eat chips all the time. Okay, I eat chips once in a while, it's one of my devil foods, right? But You have to eat
So do
healthy
I.
food. You
I
have
still
to
may
eat
try to
healthy
make it
food. And I
organic if
drink
I do
red
it.
wine. I like my red wine, you know, but pick your poison. But eat healthy, you know, because that's what's gonna tie you and connect you to the subtler energies. And if your body is bogged down with this low frequency stuff, like if you eat primarily meat, and your meat is already full of chemicals, and you know they grow them on these farms, and they, you know, inject them with all kinds of vaccines, and they're just full of toxins, and you eat that, you're going to take that information into your body. So that just shows you, Gail, how amazing our bodies really are. It's a miracle that some people are still living and breathing, and that we as humans are still actually functioning to a certain degree in the world. But I also know where we could be, having had the, you know, part of my life in that chapter. I was in that world with the Ann Wigmores and the Victor Kovinskases and the Gabriel Cousins and all these people. Like I was in that, I was exploring that, and I explored that world. And it's true. I mean, you have to pay attention to that. You can't ignore that. It's part of being a whole being. You need to learn about these things, and you need to fortify your body with the thing that is, we happen to be humans in biological bodies. So we need the form of information that we need happens to be food. That's how we take in a certain kind of information. Then there's the information coming in from, you know, all the other sources too, but the information coming from food is another form of expression that we need to convert in our bodies to something positive. And if it's toxic and a low bovie count, it's not going to help us. It's going to pull us down.
And then you add to that the frequencies that we're exposed to. I mean, basically, we're being microwaved
Yes, we
on a
literally
daily
are being
basis.
microwaved with 5G.
Yes. Now, that's a sensitive subject, and I would like to discuss it further. So I'm going to, people can move to the Dot Connectors channel, and because she said she's willing to take a strike if they take her down because she can afford it. I can't right now because it'll take everything down. So, but I want to put the truth out. So I really, and one part of me says I don't care. I just want to talk to tell it. The other part's, well, work with the system as much as you have to, and nothing if you get taken down because nobody will see you.
Right.
And, you know, so here we go. All right, I'm going to take my excuse me. Interesting that I'm having a coughing fit by taking that up. Anyway, I don't know what got that on, but it's still hanging there. Anyway,
Take a drink.
yeah, just
Hi, can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, great. Hi, Frank. How are you?
I'm good.
Great conversation. We're going to go over to the Dot Connector channel, and I've put it in chat a few times. I'm going to put it in again. And if you can all go over to that link, we will continue this conversation. And there's much more to come, I'm sure. And Frank, I did put some of your links in the chat as well.
Oh, thank you.
Your website, the link for the Tale of Two Timelines, which is great, and that's current. That's your new project, correct?
That's my current project. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I also saw Solar Revolution a couple times, so I also put that in the chat because that was fantastic as well.
Thank you. Yeah, well, all our films are, even though they're not our current project, they're all still current. It's funny. Yeah.
It is. You're right. I mean, it was made, what, 2012 or something like that?
2012 is when we released Solar Revolution. Yeah.
It could have been made yesterday.
I know. There's no comparative film that came out after it either. No one ever really touched the subject again.
Wow. Amazing.
Wow, I just felt like I got punched in the throat chakra. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm dead serious. But anyway, we'll carry on.
Sorry.
And I am still on Rumble and Odyssey. If you're there, you don't have to go anywhere. But
And all links are in the description below the video. We have a lot of Frank's links as well as Gail's links for his website and etc.
I will try to mute if I have to cough. This is really strange because I don't have a cold or anything. So
It's all timing, right? Synchronicity.
anyway, carry on. Moving right along. One of the reasons that I wanted to move to the uncensored channels was because Frank has some very important information that has just came out in the last 3 or 4 days, and I want to cover it on this channel as well and spread it as far and wide as possible. And I would always encourage you to watch the Inspire channel and with Frank and Jean whenever they have a conversation. It's always extremely interesting. So
yes.
It's John. I know everyone always says Gene. I've said it too because he spells it like Gene, but it's John.
I know. I didn't get that for quite a while. I'm going, well, it looks like Gene. Why does he say John? So
it's
anyway,
French.
Yeah, he does great work. So
well, yeah, we had a show and we had the same problem. We had to leave YouTube because it went off the ranch, and when you go off the reservation, you
exactly.
we now live in that Orwellian world where we can no longer speak the truth.
Exactly.
And a lot of these organizations are stepping up their censorship. I was just recently censored in Germany. I had a scheduled live appearance and that was canceled because the owners of the venue saw the description of what I was talking about on my poster and felt threatened, and so they canceled the event, just pulled the rug out from under the host's feet.
Wow, unbelievable.
Okay, so are we ready to go over, Gail, or
yeah,
so have we been live all this time or we're not live?
Yeah, we're still live. I turned off my YouTube channel, I think. No,
I'm still in the chat. It still is up on your channel.
I just took it off for sure. Okay. I took it off once. They put it back on. Okay. It's supposed to be off now. I'm double checking right now. It goes right back on. That is, what the heck? That's pretty weird. Okay.